Welcome back to the movie recap. Today's movie will be a 2020 American war drama film titled Battle of the Bulge, Winter War. Sit back, relax and enjoy the video. In 1994, the Germans assembled to attack the last Western Front during World War II. But on the other hand, the Americans faced great losses during the war. Snow covers the pine trees of the Ardennes. Lieutenant Cappa, kneeling on the icy ground, senses his surroundings. He hears faint noises, which seem to be gunshots or explosives. He immediately stands up and strenuously runs leftward on the thick snow-covered ground, passing through the tall pine trees. Eventually, he reaches the defense area of a group of soldiers with half of their bodies buried in the icy ground. At first, they are confused and shocked at how a soldier suddenly sweeps in front of them. Still, they assemble and rain their bullets on him but miss him since Cappa runs quickly without looking back. At the same time, Captain Daniels tries to reach out through the radio with their general. He keeps repeating "Little Blue" to return, only to find himself disappointed because there is no response. He goes back to his teammates and asks about the condition of their armored military vehicle. Another distress reveals itself as they are stuck because the battery malfunctions due to the cold, which makes their car unable to move. A soldier nicknamed Lefty also says he cannot communicate with the vehicle's built-in radio unless they are on higher ground. Daniels shows frustration through his deep breaths. He commands his soldiers to give themselves 10 minutes. If they still fail to get out of their location, they have to salvage only the equipment they can and destroy the rest. He firmly says not to leave anything for the Germans. The soldiers agree straight away. Another scene shows Corporal Jack running back to his platoon. The soldier questions him about what he saw, but he says he did not have a clear look. He gives his orders to his men. He tells them to spread down their perimeter to the tree line, and they must only shoot if he does. So, they obey him and hold their position. After a while, a soldier riding a horse observes the area quietly. The American troops patiently watch as they sense what the soldier is up to, but he only stays for a few moments and then leaves. Concurrently, Cappa goes face to face with a German and his troops. Both stunned by the encounter, the German at last shouts, with the attention of his co-soldiers. He escapes and hides behind a fallen tree trunk. He decides to crawl on the snowy trail, which acquires the awareness of the German soldiers of his hiding spot. They launch their gunshots at him, but he dodges all of them while running. Meanwhile, Major General Mike walks into their headquarters office. Captain Haas welcomes him as he responds with updates from different units of soldiers. The reports are massive displays of disadvantages. Haas says that Sector H is withdrawing. The German 12th and 9th Panzer Divisions seem to be in full force and ready to knock them out. Apparently, all units report encounters with the enemies. Major General Mike clears his throat as he tries to absorb the grave and stressful news. He instantly inquires about their spotting plane, but Haas states that they are working on the aircraft. However, the weather is not ideal. Nevertheless, he still urges him to make amends as he wants aerial observation to be implemented. Lastly, he confirms that Captain Daniels and Lieutenant Cappa have yet to report. Once again, Daniels tries to report through the radio by calling Little Blue. His guys, still in their vehicle, attempt to make it work. After a while, two more vehicles approach them with a platoon of soldiers. The lieutenant with the military police uniform who just arrived goes out and questions them about their condition. He speaks fluent English, and that's why they assume they are comrades. Next, the lieutenant inspects them and asks more about the vehicle, to which the American soldiers anticipate being given a ride. Finally, they are asked if anybody knows their whereabouts, and they promptly say no. He chuckles, looks back to his men, and gives them a hand sign implying to dispose of them. One of the soldiers asks him what to do with the dead bodies in German, which confirms that the opposing army of Krauts is only dressed in American uniforms. Daniels, from afar, clearly discerns what has happened to his troop and escapes the location without being noticed. Meantime, the unit of Captain Jack walks on the thick snow while some complain about the cold. Later, they encounter a group of soldiers, and one of them talks in fluent English. Everyone looks like Americans and dresses like their allies. The captain of the latter unit invites them to join forces to strengthen their defense against the Germans. One soldier from Jack's unit unquestionably agrees and joins, hopeful for hot food. The rest are still doubtful. Nevertheless, Jack lets his unit join regardless of feeling something is not quite right. At that moment, Cappa still runs, leading a couple of German soldiers behind him. His comrade from a distance shouts for him to hurry up, with the Germans racing, unaware of the explosives as traps buried under the snow. Cappa reaches his companions and dives into the excavation while they cover for him, firing at the enemies. His co-soldier defends him from a sudden attack of a Kraut shovel. He lost consciousness after that. He rages back into Major General Mike's tent, not knowing where the German panzer tanks are. He commands the lieutenant of the 755th platoon to exhaust all his efforts to communicate with his men despite not being in contact with them since yesterday. He encourages him that they need him more this time than ever and that they have to get back to fighting. Then, he summons all the other soldiers in the tent and reminds them that the fight still exists and they must not feel defeated. Afterward, Major Omar Bradley enters the tent and learns that infantry, tanks, and artillery are running low. The Germans are right down the Elsenborn Road, along Gavin Road and the Ondar Bridge. He believes that their location is exposed, and the enemies can surround them any minute. Bradley asks if there is still available resistance. Still, they also lack manpower as only small isolated units are left. At the same time, Jack's men, being with the American pretenders, are clueless about the danger they must have come to face. One of the soldiers notices that the marking on the vehicle is the same as with the headquarters, which is questionable. Still, Jack brushes off the idea and comes with them. The next scene shows what's left of the hospital in North Lanzareth. Doc walks and witnesses the sufferings of injured soldiers. Finally, Cappa gains consciousness, and Captain Mary, the nurse, informs him of his gunshot wound. He tells her he has to go, but she stops him because his stitches still need to be set. Doc meets him and gives him back his belongings. In the end, Cappa insists on leaving the hospital. Finally, Cappa reaches their headquarters and shakes hands with one of the soldiers in his unit. He finds out that not all of them made it from the ambush, and he is the only officer left. The platoon is only left with 350 field artillery, their guns are destroyed, and they have had no contact for a long time. The soldiers acknowledge that their condition looks terrible. The Germans are constantly pushing through to attack them and dismantle their position. Daniels, being able to escape, strides his way to the thick snow. He sees Private hiding behind the trees, pointing his gun where he spots the Germans. The private tells him about the scout plane humming from above them. This makes Daniel reattempt calling Blue Bird again through his radio, and after a few moments, someone responds to his call. They detect where the Germans are located, which is also relayed to Major Mike. Meanwhile, Cappa talks to the soldiers who survived the attacks of the Germans. The soldier alongside him assures them that the Valley Creek from the east and the mines on their south flank can protect them by letting the Germans slow down. However, Cappa states that they will still come regardless of how slow it takes. They are low on ammunition, not much for tank defense, and have no hopes of having a friendly fire, artillery, or reinforcements. They are at a more significant disadvantage because of how the Germans managed to bring down their troops. Nevertheless, the soldiers are determined to hold their positions and continue the fight. They claim that they owe this fight to their fellow soldiers and themselves. Still, Cappa is steadfast in making the last unit survive with him and no longer agrees to make sacrifices. Moments later, Jack's unit reaches the depot where Lieutenant Cappa is situated. They are with the English-speaking Germans, still unaware of the wolves in sheep's clothing. The German lieutenant asks them about the depot's guns, fuel, and ammunition. Cappa answers that they ordered to blow it up to leave nothing for the Krauts. He insists on changing the orders, but Cappa is unyielding as he wants to prioritize the evacuation of the wounded officers. Finally, at the end of their argument, the lieutenant submits and lets Cappa do what he wants for the depot. Simultaneously, Major Mike and Brad converse about their strategies and the positioning of their soldiers. Brad acquires intelligence that there are English-speaking Germans dressed in American military police uniforms moving in and out of their platoon's lines. This information disturbs Mike as it can severely infiltrate and manipulate the soldiers and their supplies. Still having trouble with the American pretender Krauts, another problem arises in the depot. Cappa states they need the jeep to transfer the wounded, but the German soldier stops him. The lieutenant, who acts as a mediator, also denies the request of Cappa even upon saying that the vehicle belongs to their headquarters. He tells them to just walk, but Cappa refuses to leave and stands up to wait for clarification. This made the lieutenant submit his request again and let them drive the vehicles. After the platoon leaves, the Germans are ordered to dispose of the remaining American outposts and wounded soldiers. As the vehicles pass through the main road, they bump into Daniels, carried by two men supporting each of his shoulders. They immediately help him walk back to the jeep and bring him water. After a while, Daniels notices they were driving his former headquarters jeep when the Germans ambushed his men. Cappa asks the other soldiers who came with them, and they admit that something seems off about them. After all the clues have been put into pieces, they conclude that they are German and must come back. The men deliberate what to do, if they are going to hide or put up a fight. After the discussion, they finally plan to fight. Cappa orders the runners to inform the other units and prepare for the battle. The sergeants are high-spirited and cooperative with the command. As they hear the cue, they hurriedly board the military jeep to their assigned positions. Daniel's unit is in control of luring the Germans to be ambushed. They wave and smile at them, looking like allies. The men inside the tanks patiently wait for the signal and for the crowds to gather closer. Finally, Daniel shouts, "Hit it," and gunfire from rifles and tanks begins. Germans panic as they try to escape, but they are no faster than the bullets. On the other hand, the Americans are full of rage about winning the war. Jack's unit makes its way back to the depot. At once, back in the depot, one wounded American sergeant converses with another soldier, unaware he is German. The German learns that the Americans still have the checkpoints to look and fight for the crowds. After gathering that information, he goes behind the soldier and points his rifle at his head. Cappa's troop, now led by the sergeant, prepares themselves to face a massive number of Germans toward their way. The men of color hiding behind the barricade defend themselves and rain down their bullets after the sergeant confirms his signal. The Germans are racing towards them and are scattered, and they are slowly being outnumbered. The German sergeant warns the lieutenant about the Americans' location. The lieutenant throws a tantrum and requires urgency from his soldiers. Jack's unit arrives at the depot, ambushing the Germans. The Germans gather to defend themselves. On an elevated ground, Daniel's unit hides and crawls silently. A soldier counts down with his hand and gives the army his signal to drizzle the enemies with bullets. The Germans are in shock due to the sudden ambush. Both sides showered their bullets against each other in different parts of the Ardennes and sabotaged German panzer tanks. A complication appears in the depot as the explosive used to destroy the supplies is defective and can only be utilized manually. Wayne, a wounded soldier, overhears the conversation and volunteers to do it and to stay behind. He assures his comrades that he wants to do it and that he will be alright. Jack's unit is still firing the depot using the tank, and their rifles are informed that the explosive is set and they only have 5 minutes. Cappa shouts for the soldiers to move out, making the gunshots stop. However, the Germans hurriedly go to the location of the petrol, where they spot Wayne holding the explosive. They try to threaten him not to move, but it's already too late, and they are all affected by the explosion's impact. Brad enters the major's tent and updates Mike about what the Germans are up to. He asks him where they should make their stand, and Mike points at Bastogne. He commands Haas to prepare the jeep because they are going to mention location. The remaining units are ordered to turn and fight, stopping the Germans and slowing them down. The remaining reinforcements in the Ardennes greet each other to celebrate their small victory as they cross paths and are ready to head to Bastogne. Finally, the ending shows the military vehicles of the American soldiers heading to Bastogne to continue their war against the Germans. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more videos like this to help the channel out. Have a nice day.